As the sun dipped below the horizon, the bustling cities of medieval Europe, alive with activity, began to fade into shadows. Markets that had teemed with merchants, children playing in the streets, and the vibrant hum of daily life now fell silent, giving way to a world far darker and more dangerous than we often realize. The sun's retreat wasn't just the end of the day, it was the beginning of something altogether different, a time when the world transformed sometimes for the better, but often for the worse. What most modern histories overlook is that the night was no simple absence of light. It was a world unto itself, full of secrets, fears, and mysteries. By day, medieval cities could be lively, even prosperous, but the moment darkness fell, everything changed. The streets, once safe for trade, became labyrinths of risk and suspicion. The nighttime held both allure and terror, a time when ordinary men and women faced challenges that were impossible to ignore. As society wound down, ancient forces real and imagined began to stir. Consider, for a moment, how we often romanticize the day. The markets where farmers hawked their goods, the inns full of laughter and stories, the work being done beneath the sun's watchful eye. It's easy to think of the medieval period as one long, vibrant day, but the truth is far darker. The night was a time when entire cities became unfamiliar. When the torches flickered and the moonlight spilled over cobblestone streets, the world shifted. For some, the night was an opportunity, an escape from the eyes of authorities, a chance to engage in illicit dealings. For others, it was a time to pray, to ward off the very forces that seemed to come alive in the darkness. The night was not only feared, it was also revered. In contrast to the daytime, it became a period of deep spiritual reflection and mystical beliefs. What people believed in the daytime, they often feared or sought protection from when the sun set. Yet, as history often paints only the bright moments of the medieval world, the reality of what happened after dark is too often left in the shadows. If we are to truly understand medieval life, we must go beyond the daytime stories and explore the forgotten world that emerged with the fall of night. What if everything you knew about medieval life was only half the story? The truth is that beneath the surface of history, there lies a much deeper mystery. After all, the night was not simply a time for sleep. It was a time when the boundaries between the living and the dead, the natural and the supernatural, were far thinner than we realize. This is the world we will uncover, the world of medieval nights, where every flicker of candlelight and every sound from the darkness carried with it stories yet untold. What really happened when the torches flickered and the moon took over the sky? We are about to find out. As the world sank into darkness, a different kind of life began to unfold in the shadows. The night was not simply a void to be feared, it was a realm in which the mystical, the sacred, and the supernatural thrived. The people of medieval Europe believed that once the sun had set, the veil between the physical and the spiritual world became thin. It was a time when strange and powerful forces could enter the realm of the living. The air seemed charged with mystery, as though every whisper of wind carried ancient secrets. It was no coincidence that many of the most important spiritual rituals were conducted under the cover of night. Midnight Mass, for instance, was one of the most powerful religious ceremonies of the medieval church. For the devout, the hour when most of the world slept was the perfect time to commune with the divine. The midnight hour was considered sacred, a time to pray for protection, to seek blessings, and to ward off evil. But while the church was focused on salvation, many others turned to the night for more personal reasons, seeking the safety of their homes or, in some cases, something far more sinister. In medieval Europe, the night was home to a variety of beliefs and rituals that centered on appeasing the forces beyond human control. Saints were invoked in whispered prayers, their intercessions believed to protect people from the dangers of the dark. But it wasn't just saints people called upon. The night also had a darker side, with whispers of demonic forces and spirits that roamed freely when the moon rose. It wasn't uncommon for people to gather in small groups, either in their homes or the back corners of churches, to perform rituals aimed at keeping these nightmarish beings at bay. Charms, potions, and protective symbols were drawn on doorways, all to fend off the unknown. In these quiet, candlelit corners, where shadows cast eerie figures across the stone floors, people embraced the darkness with both reverence and fear. Even the very act of going to bed was fraught with superstition. The medieval mind was not quick to dismiss the idea that creatures of the night, perhaps a ghost or a demon, might find their way into the home. Many believed that sleeping with your feet uncovered could leave you vulnerable to unseen forces. And then there was the ancient belief in night walkers, those who walked the earth during the night, cursed to roam the dark hours forever. The rituals and beliefs surrounding the night weren't limited to those of the church alone. Folk traditions, passed down through generations, ran deep in medieval life. As soon as night fell, people turned to their homes, bolted their doors, and set out small offerings to ensure a peaceful rest. These practices, often dismissed as superstition today, were woven into the fabric of everyday medieval life. The darkness of night was both a sanctuary and a threat, a place to seek comfort and protection, but also a place where the unknown could slip through the cracks of reality. At midnight, when the world slept, something ancient and powerful stirred in the shadows. What did people believe they were calling upon when they gathered in the darkness? Was it salvation? Or was it something more sinister, something that could either heal or destroy? These are the mysteries that were not often written about, left instead to the flicker of candlelight and the whispers of those who dared to venture into the night. As we turn our gaze from the rituals of the sacred to the darker side of the medieval night, we find ourselves asking the same question the people of the time would have. Who or what is really out there? Beyond the light? As we step deeper into the night, we begin to realize that the world of the living was far from the only world people had to fear. The true danger of medieval nights came from what lurked in the shadows, waiting for the cover of darkness to make itself known. The night in medieval Europe was not a time for rest or relaxation. It was a time of constant vigilance. While the moonlight cast eerie shadows over the city streets, a far more dangerous presence lingered in the dark. Beneath the shroud of darkness, the world of day-to-day life faded, replaced by an undercurrent of fear. The streets, which bustled with commerce and laughter by day, were now home to the shadows that crept along stone walls, waiting for an unsuspecting victim. Thieves, murderers, and outcasts made the night their territory. At dusk, when the last light from the setting sun barely touched the horizon, the first signs of danger emerged. Without the safety of street lamps or electric lights, the darkness became an oppressive weight, suffocating the streets. The cobblestones, now slick with dew, could easily become traps for those unprepared. The city's watchmen, though diligent, were few in number, and their efforts were often spread thin. In truth, the night belonged to the lawless. Criminals thrived in the absence of light, using the cover of darkness to move undetected through the streets. But it wasn't just criminals who posed a threat. The medieval world was rife with disease, and the night was no exception. The same shadows that hid thieves also concealed the spread of plague, fever, and infection. At a time when medicine was in its infancy, the origins of disease were largely a mystery, and the night offered no protection from the invisible dangers it harbored. Many believed that sickness was sent by divine wrath, or that the air itself had become cursed by the dead wandering in the dark. It was in the quiet of night that outbreaks would begin, spreading through the population before anyone knew what had happened. The lack of hygiene, the unrelenting presence of rats, and the confined spaces where people lived, made the night a breeding ground for death. Nightfall also brought a different kind of violence. With the fall of darkness, so too did the walls between the classes seem to rise. The poor, those forced to live in the squalor of the city's slums, found themselves at the mercy of those who sought power. The wealthy, meanwhile, secured themselves within fortified homes or guarded palaces, only emerging at dawn. But the rich were not entirely safe. Nobles had their own struggles, their own dangers to contend with: assassinations, betrayals, and the ever-present threat of being caught in the crossfire of political unrest. The medieval world after dark was full of uncertainty, and even the highest in society could not escape the fear that came with the night. In the dark, the streets were never empty, but the shadows were full of danger. Every alley held the possibility of an encounter with someone or something that should not have been there. It wasn't just the criminals who posed a threat, but the very environment itself. Nighttime in medieval Europe meant that the world was a far more treacherous place. Could you have survived the night in medieval Europe? What would you have done in a world where the risk of death, disease, or worse was just a step away, hidden beneath the blanket of darkness? The night wasn't just about fear, it was about survival. And yet, for all its dangers, the night also held its own kind of beauty. There were moments when the darkness seemed to offer more than just peril. But as we continue through the medieval night, we must ask, how did people, from nobles to peasants, adapt to this dangerous world once the sun sank below the horizon? What rituals, routines, and strategies did they adopt to ensure they could live through the night and make it to another sunrise? As the sun finally sank beneath the horizon, the rhythm of medieval life shifted. The world that had been buzzing with activity markets filled with the chatter of vendors, craftsmen toiling in their shops, and the heavy footfalls of soldiers on patrol slowed. The pulse of the day became a distant memory, fading into the quiet embrace of night. But for the people of the medieval world, the darkness was not a time for rest, but a time to adapt, to shift routines, and to continue living under the constraints of an unforgiving world. For the peasant, the end of the day did not signal the end of work. The hard labor of the fields and the demands of the household could never be completed before nightfall. Instead, their day stretched into the twilight hours, illuminated only by the soft flickering light of a hearth or a candle. A single flame in a small cramped cottage held the power to keep the darkness and the dangers that accompanied it at bay. As night settled over the land, peasants would gather around the fire, sharing simple meals of bread and stew, while the elders recounted stories of old, passed down through generations. These moments of rest were brief, fleeting, but essential. There was always work to be done, repairing tools, mending clothes, preparing food for the coming day. The night was their only opportunity to sit in the safety of their homes, to find solace in the warmth of the fire and the presence of their loved ones. For the wealthy, the transition from day to night brought with it a shift in power. In their grand houses and castles, the change in light meant more than just the end of the day. It meant a change in the atmosphere. The evening was often reserved for entertainment and feasting. Dinners stretched late into the night, filled with wine, laughter, and stories, as nobility and their guests sought to forget the struggles of their daytime lives. But the rich, too, had their own unique set of responsibilities and anxieties. With the fall of darkness, their bodies remained cloaked in luxury, but their minds were never truly free. Nobles had to worry about the intrigues of politics, the betrayal of allies, and the ever-present threat of assassination. Even within their guarded walls, the night held its dangers. Yet, within these palatial confines, the night also carried a sense of freedom, a time to indulge in pleasures, to escape from the harsh realities that ruled their days. Monks, on the other hand, embraced the night as a time for spiritual reflection and prayer. For them, the night was not a time to relax, but to connect with the divine. In the quiet of the cloister, with only the sound of their footsteps echoing off the stone walls, they would gather for prayers, chants, and vigils. Midnight Mass was one of the most sacred times in the monastic routine, where the faithful, by candlelight, sought the protection of saints and God in the stillness of the night. The monks, stripped of worldly distractions, used the darkness as a tool to reach spiritual clarity, as though the absence of the sun allowed them to draw closer to the divine. But while these routines painted a picture of the medieval night as an orderly, ritualistic time, the truth was much more complex. For many, the darkness brought not just rituals and routines, but a sense of unease, a shift in perspective. It was a time to reflect, to fear, and to engage in the more dangerous, more hidden aspects of society. Artisans continued their work, laboring into the night by candlelight, their hands creating goods that would soon be sold, traded, or used in distant lands. For these skilled workers, the night was a time of productivity, a time when their talents were put to the test in a world that demanded constant work, no matter the hour. When the sun set, everything changed. The medieval world didn't stop it, simply transformed. What might seem like an ordinary transition from day to night for us today was, for medieval people, a shift into an entirely different world. For some, the darkness held moments of peace, a break from the demands of the day. For others, it was a time to stay vigilant, to continue working, or to prepare for the dangers that came when the moonlight replaced the sun's warmth. And yet, despite the constant tension between danger and safety, between fear and peace, the night became an essential part of life. It was not something to be feared or forgotten, it was something to be embraced. As the night crept further in, so too did the roles and rituals that governed it. But what was life really like after dark, for those who held power, the nobility, the lords, and the rulers of the time? How did their lives differ from the common folk, and what privileges or dangers did they face in the deep hours of the night? As the night fell over the medieval landscape, The world of the noble class unfolded in ways that were hidden from the eyes of the common folk. While the streets outside were often dangerous, filled with shadows that concealed threats, within the high stone walls of the castles and grand estates, power and privilege thrived in silence. For the nobles, the setting sun did not signal the end of their day, but the beginning of something far more important. It was after dark that the most influential decisions were made, alliances were forged, and the very fabric of power was woven. Inside these opulent spaces, the night was a time of celebration and control. Banquets filled with extravagant feasts were a common feature. The aristocracy, having already enjoyed lavish meals in the daylight, would gather after sunset for another round of indulgence. Wine flowed in abundance, and the finest meats, fruits, and delicacies were laid out on long wooden tables, illuminated only by the soft glow of candles and flickering torches. The laughter and chatter that filled these halls were not only of friendship and mirth, they were also of diplomacy. Every conversation, every glance exchanged, was weighed for its political value. Nobles used the cover of the evening to secure alliances, settle disputes, and, at times, even seal the fate of entire kingdoms. But behind the festivity, the reality of aristocratic life after dark was often far more solitary and secretive. The grand halls and dining rooms were only one layer of the evening. When the night deepened and the guests departed, the castle would close its doors and walls, drawing its curtains on the outside world. Behind these fortress-like walls, it was a time of seclusion and reflection. Only a select few trusted servants, bodyguards, and advisors were allowed into the inner chambers of the nobles. Here, decisions were made that would shape the future of nations, in the privacy of shadowed rooms, with only the soft rustling of silk and the quiet murmurs of courtiers. Security was paramount. While the commoners outside faced the risks of brigands and thieves, the elite had their own form of danger to consider. Political enemies were often not far away, and the risk of betrayal was ever present. Personal guards were posted in every corridor, hidden behind tapestries and around corners. The air inside the castle was thick with intrigue. The nobility didn't just spend their nights in celebration, they were constantly on guard, mindful of the fragile line between power and ruin. The night served as both a shield and a sword. For the elite, it was a time to protect their legacy, to solidify their influence, and to keep their wealth from slipping away. But the isolation of these private chambers, tucked away from prying eyes, came with its own set of challenges. A nobleman or woman could never fully trust anyone, even in the safety of their own home. Secrets whispered in the darkened halls were the most dangerous. The face they presented to the world during daylight hours full of grandeur and strength was not the same face they wore behind closed doors. The true essence of their power was not in their public life, but in the quiet manipulation of politics and people. Here, in the darkness, the masks fell, revealing those who truly held the strings of control. While the streets outside were dangerous, inside the castles, power and privilege thrived in the silence of night. But what went on behind those stone walls when the sun set? How many deals were struck in the shadows? How many plans made that would forever change the course of history? The answers, hidden deep within these walls, are far more mysterious than most realize. As we move deeper into the world of the aristocracy, the darkness of their night will reveal secrets that are still waiting to be uncovered. When the moon was high and the castle grounds lay in silence, a different kind of power began to take shape behind closed doors. For the noble class, the hours after dark were not merely a time to rest. These were the hours when the most delicate of political dealings took place, far from the eyes of the public. Midnight councils, hidden letters, and covert meetings in the shadows of the palace formed the backbone of medieval political life. And as the world outside the castle slept, those at the top of the social ladder held the fate of nations in their hands. It was during these late-night gatherings that critical decisions were made. The grand halls, once filled with guests, now stood empty and quiet. The flickering flames of candles illuminated the faces of those trusted with the kingdom's most sensitive secrets. These clandestine meetings were often a time for deep plotting, when the fate of alliances, treaties, and even the very borders of nations were determined in whispers and glances. What was discussed in these hidden rooms never reached the ears of the common folk, nor were the consequences of those decisions ever fully known until it was too late. The night, with its thick veil of darkness, offered a level of protection. It allowed nobles to speak freely without the fear of being overheard. This was the time when the most dangerous secrets were shared, when loyalty was tested, and when trust was sometimes betrayed. Midnight politics were a game of shadows, where a single word could alter the course of history. The night's quiet seemed to cloak the ambitions and schemes of those who ruled, and their decisions could leave entire kingdoms teetering on the brink of war or peace. The allure of the night held a strange power over those who played these games. The darkness provided a refuge for decisions that would otherwise be considered too treacherous in the light of day. Perhaps it was the absence of the sun's judgment that allowed these men and women to cast aside their morals, or perhaps it was the intoxicating mix of power and secrecy that kept them coming back. For some, these midnight meetings were where they felt truly alive, in control of a world that seemed to exist only for them. Beneath the cover of darkness, the fate of kingdoms was decided. The political webs that were spun in these late hours were often far more intricate than any we might imagine. Some of these midnight dealings shaped wars, revolutions, and alliances that would alter the course of history forever. It was here, in the shadows, that the true nature of power revealed itself, not in grand speeches or public declarations, but in the whispered agreements of a select few. But the danger was ever present. The aristocracy too had their enemies, and the night was a time when those enemies often chose to strike. The secrecy of these meetings carried a cost, a price paid in the form of betrayal and violence. Those who sought power in the shadows often found themselves devoured by the darkness they had come to embrace. And as the years passed, the lines between political strategy and moral compromise became increasingly blurred. As the night wore on, the noble class's grip on power grew ever tighter, with deals struck and alliances formed in secret. But in the darkness, where trust was fragile and betrayal never far behind, the true cost of these midnight meetings remained hidden from the world. What secrets were shared in those darkened rooms? What hidden plans changed the fates of nations, lying dormant in the annals of history, only waiting to be uncovered? In the darkness of the medieval night, when the world seemed to fall silent, the lives of women, especially those of the aristocracy, unfolded in quiet yet powerful ways. In a world dominated by men, the night offered them an unexpected kind of refuge, a chance to wield power in the shadows. But it was a power often obscured by societal expectations, where their actions had to be concealed beneath the veil of secrecy. Whether they were noble women or peasants, their lives were shaped by the same forces that dominated the night: secrecy, danger, and survival. For noble women, the night was often a time to exercise their influence in ways that were hidden from the public eye. While their male counterparts attended feasts or held court, women often remained behind closed doors, where they could speak freely, negotiate alliances, or maneuver their way through the intricate web of court politics. Yet, despite their important roles in shaping their families' destinies, they were often relegated to the shadows, their power less visible but no less significant. Their influence was most often felt through their marriages, alliances, and the children they bore, but behind closed doors, these women shaped the political landscape in subtle ways. Some women, however, found their place in the night outside the confines of the castle or noble home. The medieval world, with all its mysteries, often turned to women for guidance in the unseen realms, whether that meant midwifery, healing, or even the occult. Late-night rituals, meant to ward off illness or call upon spirits, often found their way into the hands of women who were skilled in herbs, potions, and ancient practices. In a society where women were largely excluded from formal power, these hidden roles allowed them a form of agency that few others could claim. At the same time, however, the very skills that empowered women in the darkness also made them vulnerable. The medieval church, which controlled much of society's moral and spiritual life, viewed many of these practices as dangerous. Women who dabbled in the occult or were accused of witchcraft were often persecuted and punished. The dark of night, once a place of empowerment, could also turn deadly when accusations of witchcraft arose. A woman's knowledge of herbs, or her ability to heal, could be twisted into suspicion, leading to horrifying consequences. In a world dominated by men, women found ways to claim their power in the shadows. Their lives after dark were shaped by their need to navigate a system that excluded them from the larger world of politics and public life. But it was in the night, where secrecy and hidden power thrived, that they could carve out spaces of their own. What did they do when the night fell? How did they navigate a world that sought to suppress their influence, even as it acknowledged their power in the most unexpected ways? Their role after dark was not just one of survival, it was one of quiet resistance, subtle rebellion, and hidden strength. As we move forward, the complexities of medieval life at night will unfold further, revealing how the structures that shape the lives of men and women in this dark world intersected in powerful and sometimes dangerous ways. As the world slumbered under the heavy blanket of night, another world stirred in the shadows. It was a world where the mundane met the divine, where the physical realm blurred with the supernatural, and where the sacred rituals of the church took on an otherworldly significance. Midnight Mass, a sacred tradition in medieval Christianity, wasn't just another religious service. It was a portal, a liminal space where the boundary between the living and the dead seemed to dissolve. The church had long understood the power of the night, a time when the veil between the seen and unseen was thinner, and thus more susceptible to divine intervention. The practice of midnight worship was born out of necessity, for it was believed that the night offered a unique kind of communion with the divine. There was something almost mystical about the hour of midnight. As the clock struck 12, the world outside the walls of the church fell silent, leaving behind a sense of timelessness. For the faithful, this silence became the perfect backdrop for prayer and reflection. It was a moment of stillness when the soul could align itself more closely with God. The night, as the church saw it, wasn't just a dark void to be feared. It was a time to reflect, to seek forgiveness, and to feel the presence of the divine in a more profound way. These midnight services weren't merely ceremonial. For many, they were a matter of survival, a way to protect oneself from the invisible dangers of the night. The medieval world, filled with superstition and fear, was convinced that the dark hours were the most dangerous. It was in the dead of night that the forces of evil were believed to be most active. Demons, spirits, and the restless dead roamed freely, seeking to corrupt and possess. The church, recognizing the power of this fear, positioned itself as the sole protector against such malevolent forces. Midnight Mass became an act of spiritual defense, a ritual to secure God's protection against the unseen dangers that lurked in the dark. In addition to Mass, the faithful often engaged in other rituals, particularly vigils for the dead. These vigils, held in the quiet of the night, were deeply intertwined with the belief that the night was a time when the dead could return, when the souls of the departed might cross over from their resting place and wander the earthly realm. It was believed that through prayer, these spirits could find peace, and their restless souls could be guided to the afterlife. The presence of candles, incense, and the soft murmur of prayers created a sanctified atmosphere, one where the living sought to help the dead move on, and in doing so, protect themselves from the unsettling uncertainty of what might happen when night fell. The night was not merely a time for rest, but an opportunity for spiritual connection, a time when the physical world faded, and the realm of the divine seemed closer than ever. The church's rituals, rooted in ancient traditions, turned the darkness into something sacred. Where the secular world saw only fear, the faithful saw the night as a time of connection, a time to draw closer to God, to ward off evil, and to feel the protective embrace of the divine. While the world slept, the faithful gathered in the dead of night, whispering prayers to saints and the dead. But what was so powerful about the hour of midnight? Why did the church, with its immense power, choose this hour to conduct its most sacred rites? The truth lies in the unique connection that the night provided, a connection to both the divine and the unseen, to forces both protective and destructive. As we look closer at the church's influence during the medieval night, we begin to uncover not just its role in salvation, but its power in shaping how the medieval world understood both life and death. The night, a time for reflection and prayer, was also the time when the shadows of fear grew larger. As the medieval world sought solace in the sacred, it also wrestled with the terrifying notion of what lay beyond. It was during the stillness of the night, when the rest of the world slept, that the church focused its efforts on battling the very forces of darkness itself, demons, spirits, and witches that were thought to be most powerful when the moon hung high. For centuries, the medieval church propagated a powerful, pervasive fear of the supernatural, and the night was where this fear came to life. It was believed that as the world grew quiet, evil grew stronger. Demons, drawn to the vulnerability of humans in the dark, were thought to possess the living, corrupt their souls, and lead them astray. It was the Church's role to combat this, to protect the faithful from these malevolent entities. Exorcisms became not just rituals of faith, but acts of war against the unseen world. Exorcisms, often performed in the dead of night, were terrifying events. The possessed, often believed to be under the control of demons, would writhe and scream, their bodies contorting in unnatural ways. The Church's clergy, priests and bishops, armed with holy relics and sacred words, would wage a battle of faith, calling on the power of Christ to cast out the demon that threatened the soul. The ritual was a spectacle of both horror and divine power. The night, with its dark silence, amplified the terror, as every whispered prayer and every incantation seemed to echo in the stillness of the room. But the fear didn't stop with possession. The Church also used the cover of night to hunt down those who were believed to be in league with these dark forces, witches, heretics, and practitioners of the occult. Witch hunts, which often began at twilight, became a grim reality for many innocent women and men. The Church, holding tight to the belief that witches wielded powers that could summon demons and curse the innocent, declared them enemies of God. The trials and executions that followed were often brutal, and the nights during these hunts were filled with screams, accusations, and terror. The midnight hour was often the most dangerous time, as the fear of the unknown seemed to grow more potent when the sun sank. When the world fell silent, the Church waged its most terrifying battles against demons and witches. The stakes were nothing less than the souls of the faithful, and the Church was willing to use any means necessary to protect them from what it saw as the evil that lurked in the darkness. These midnight battles were more than just physical confrontations, they were spiritual wars that echoed across time. And yet, despite its efforts, the line between good and evil, between the divine and the demonic, was never as clear as the Church would have liked to believe. The night didn't only bring a battle of faith, it brought a conflict between fear and belief. The Church was both the protector and the enforcer, its power growing stronger as the darkness deepened. The rituals of exorcism, the witch hunts, and the terrifying belief in demonic possession were all pieces in the complex puzzle of medieval life after dark. But as we move forward, we'll see how these fears and beliefs influence not only the Church's control over the night, but also the very human psyche itself. For what were demons and spirits, if not the projections of a society consumed by its own fears? The Church may have wielded immense power over the darkness, but it was not the only force at work in the medieval mind. The night, with all its hidden dangers and supernatural possibilities, played on something far deeper, the innate human fear of the unknown. It was during the hours of darkness, when the world was quiet and the natural rhythms of day were suspended, that the human imagination was free to roam. And in that freedom, superstition thrived. As night descended upon medieval villages and cities, the lack of light gave birth to a rich tapestry of fear and folklore. Creatures of the night, from werewolves to ghosts, were believed to lurk in the shadows, waiting for the moment when the weak would wander too far from safety. The darkness itself became a breeding ground for these tales, stories of monsters, demons, and spirits that crept through the night. These beliefs were not merely entertainment, but a way to explain the dangers that people faced in a world where disease, violence, and uncertainty were ever present. From peasants to scholars, the night sparked the same primal fear. With no modern understanding of disease transmission, the night seemed the perfect cover for the spread of plague, fever, and pestilence. It was in the dark that the sick seemed to grow sicker, and the healthy were often struck down without warning. The night's veil provided a fertile ground for fear, where the mind could concoct terrifying scenarios that were often as dangerous as any real threat. It wasn't the darkness itself that made the night so terrifying, it was the fear inside the human heart. What did people believe was lurking just beyond the shadows? For some, it was demons sent by the devil to claim their souls. For others, it was the restless spirits of the dead, seeking vengeance or solace. The medieval mind projected its deepest fears onto the night, creating a landscape populated by monsters, curses, and dark forces that could not be seen but were deeply felt. As we move through the history of night in medieval times, we see how these fears were intertwined with survival. The darkness became a battleground not only for the body, but for the mind. The night wasn't just a time of rest, it was a time of constant vigilance, a time when the unseen became all too real. The line between superstition and reality was blurred, and for many the belief in the supernatural was more than just a part of their culture. It was an essential piece of their understanding of the world. The fear of the dark didn't simply come from external threats, it was born from within. The human mind, shaped by superstition and fear, transformed the night into a place of both terror and wonder. And as we look at the impact of the night on people's daily lives, we begin to see how superstition, more than anything else, shaped the medieval experience. The night was not just feared, it was believed to be alive with possibilities. And for many, it was in these dark hours that the world truly revealed its mysteries. When the sun dipped below the horizon and night wrapped its cold fingers around the medieval cities, an invisible danger began to spread in the darkness. By day, life continued as usual, markets filled with merchants hawking their wares, people working the fields, and children playing in the streets. But as night descended, so too did the horrors of the unseen world, disease, death, and pestilence. The night, it seemed, became a breeding ground for contagion. But could it be that the night itself, with all its mysteries, contributed to the spread of disease? The medieval world was far from understanding the causes of illness. The science that we take for granted today didn't exist, and the knowledge of germs or sanitation was nearly non-existent. What the people of this time feared most were the strange, often deadly diseases that seemed to appear overnight, wreaking havoc before vanishing as mysteriously as they had come. The most infamous of these was the Black Death, which ravaged Europe in the 14th century. It spread through cities like wildfire, often devastating entire communities in a matter of days. The spread of plagues was directly connected to the nature of medieval urban life. Streets were crowded and cramped, and sanitation was a foreign concept. Waste was disposed of haphazardly, often left to fester in the streets, becoming a perfect breeding ground for rats and fleas. It was the fleas that carried the plague, travelling from host to host, biting humans and spreading the bacteria that would bring death. As night fell, rats and fleas became more active, creeping into homes and hiding in the shadows, often unnoticed until it was too late. And once the infection took hold, it was swift. People didn't have the luxury of time to understand what was happening. They only knew that the disease was terrifyingly quick, and often it would strike at night. The belief that night was a time for strange supernatural occurrences only compounded the fear. The darkness seemed to conceal the truth. People believed that disease was not just a physical affliction but a curse, a punishment from God, or a visitation from dark forces. As night took over, the atmosphere grew heavy, suffocating, and filled with an ever-present dread. The sudden onset of illness often felt like an unseen enemy. Just like the night itself, it was out of sight, but omnipresent. What people didn't understand was that, in reality, it was the very conditions they lived in that made the night so dangerous. The absence of light and the lack of proper hygiene created the perfect storm for disease to thrive. When the sun set, the plague spread. The terror was not just in the death tolls, but in the helplessness of those who lived through these terrifying times. Medieval people had no understanding of disease transmission. They were left only with superstition, fear, and hope. Those who survived would often retreat into their homes, bolting doors against both the night and the fear that gripped them. But could they truly escape the unseen horrors that roamed the streets? And so, the night became a symbol of the unknown. For centuries, people would associate the falling darkness with pestilence and the arrival of death. The mystery of the night, combined with the spread of disease, created a powerful connection, a cycle of fear that only deepened with every plague. The night didn't simply provide a backdrop for the suffering, it became an active participant. It was during the night, when no one could see, that the true horrors of medieval life unfolded. Disease, invisible and insidious, crept through the streets, as much a part of the night as the shadows themselves. What were medieval people doing or failing to do to protect themselves from the darkness? The answers were as varied as the people who faced the plagues, but one thing remained constant. The night was never a time of rest. It was a time of heightened danger, a time when survival often seemed like a distant hope. The night didn't just bring fear, it brought death, and in its wake, people would struggle to understand why the darkness seemed so intent on taking their lives. As we move forward from the terrifying spread of disease, we'll begin to explore how people sought protection from this invisible enemy. How did they turn to remedies, rituals, and even the supernatural to defend themselves against the fearsome forces of the night? When the sickness came and the hospitals were overcrowded, When prayers seemed to go unanswered, the people of medieval Europe turned to something more primal, more ancient, the power of belief. Faced with the unknown dangers of disease, they sought refuge in folk remedies, potions, charms, and, most controversially, witchcraft. This was a time when science and reason had little power, and the unknown was seen as a realm governed by unseen forces. And so, in the dark hours of the night, when fear weighed heavily on the soul, people turned to the rituals and practices that had been passed down through generations. Herbal remedies were the most common form of protection. The night, with its stillness and mystery, seemed the perfect time for brewing potions and concoctions. People, from the poorest peasant to the wealthiest noble, turned to these remedies, believing that nature held the cure for whatever ailment they faced. Herbs like garlic, thyme, and rosemary were often used to ward off the pestilence that swept through the cities. These herbs, thought to carry protective properties, were placed in homes or worn as amulets. In times of crisis, there was little else to rely on. But for some, these remedies weren't enough. And so, they turned to magic. Magic, in the medieval world, wasn't just a collection of superstitions, it was a genuine form of defense. Spells and rituals, many drawn from ancient pagan traditions, were believed to have the power to ward off evil spirits and diseases. To some, these acts were as necessary as prayer. At midnight, when the moon hung low, witches and wise women would gather in secret corners of the village, performing rituals that could change the course of illness or protect an entire family from the looming threat of death. Their practices, viewed with both fear and awe, became an essential part of everyday life. Yet, this practice was fraught with danger. The Church condemned witchcraft, linking it to demonic forces. Those who were believed to possess magical powers, whether true or not, became targets for suspicion. A woman seen carrying a handful of herbs or speaking a prayer in the dead of night might find herself accused of witchcraft. These accusations, often fueled by fear and superstition, led to horrific trials and executions. What was once an act of survival could quickly become a death sentence. When medicine failed, people turned to the unseen. They cast their fate upon rituals, charms, and potions, believing that these acts could save them from the darkness. But even these practices could not shield them from the fear that lay beneath the surface. As the medieval world struggled to understand the source of their suffering, they found solace in the belief that magic could offer protection where reason had failed. In a world ruled by uncertainty, superstition was both a comfort and a curse. It was their attempt to wrestle with the forces they couldn't see, but could certainly feel. As we explore these folk remedies and magical practices, we begin to see the powerful intersection of fear, superstition, and survival. These beliefs did more than offer a cure. They created a sense of control in a world where the night brought nothing but fear. But these practices, so ingrained in daily life, also gave rise to a darker side of medieval society, the witch hunts. The fear of the unknown, combined with the belief in magic, soon turned into a widespread frenzy, where neighbours became enemies, and the fear of disease was replaced by the fear of witchcraft. When superstition and fear collide, the result can be catastrophic. In medieval Europe, during times of plague and pestilence, accusations of witchcraft were often the ultimate consequence of the paranoia that gripped the population. The very practices that people had turned to in order to protect themselves, herbs, charms, and spells, soon became grounds for persecution. The darkness of the night, already feared for its association with disease and death, now became the perfect cover for the witch hunts that would spread through Europe like wildfire. The belief that witches possessed the power to control the very elements of life and death took root deeply in medieval society. People believed that witches could summon storms, cause illness, and even kill with a mere glance. As night fell, the darkness seemed to grant witches the perfect opportunity to cast their spells. Many believed that witchcraft was a nocturnal activity, shrouded in secrecy and practiced under the cover of darkness. This fear, combined with the death tolls from the plagues, created the perfect storm for the persecution of those suspected of practicing magic. The Church, with its immense power over medieval life, took an active role in hunting down those accused of witchcraft. The Inquisition, a religious institution charged with rooting out heresy, became one of the most feared instruments of control. Trials were held under the cover of darkness, often in secret locations, where the accused were subjected to horrific tortures to force confessions. The fear of the unknown, what witches could do when the sun set, fueled these trials, turning entire communities against one another. Who was truly guilty? And who was just afraid of the dark? The witch hunts blurred the lines between superstition and reality, creating an atmosphere of fear and suspicion that tore apart the very fabric of medieval society. Neighbours turned on neighbours, families betrayed one another, and the fear of witchcraft became a powerful weapon in the hands of the powerful. The Church, in its attempt to root out evil, became a part of the very machinery of persecution. What began as a fight against disease and death turned into a campaign of terror, fueled by the fear of the unseen. As we look back at these witch hunts and trials, we see how fear of the night, combined with superstition and ignorance, led to some of the darkest chapters in history. It was a time when the night was feared not just for what it concealed, but for what it might bring forth from the shadows. What was once believed to be a realm of supernatural danger soon became a battleground for power, control, and survival. From witch hunts to trials, the fear of the unknown continued to grow. In the next chapter, we will explore how these fears still echo in our modern world, shaping the way we view the night, death, and the unseen forces that continue to haunt us. What did medieval nights teach us about how we spend our nights today? Could our modern nightlife be a direct descendant of those secret midnight gatherings, where whispered words and stolen moments of freedom held more meaning than we might realize? As we look back to the medieval era, we see a time when night was far more than just a time for rest. It was a world of possibility, a chance to step outside the rigid constraints of daytime society and embrace a more communal and often rebellious way of life. In the early days of the medieval period, the night was primarily a time for reflection and rest. The Church, ever vigilant, took advantage of this quiet time to guide its flock in spiritual devotion. Yet, even in these early years, night held a powerful allure for those who craved more than just prayer. The medieval world began to weave rituals into its nights, laying the groundwork for the nightlife we know today. But unlike the modern clubs and bars that light up our city streets, medieval nocturnal activities were communal, often centered around the home or local tavern. Gatherings were smaller but no less significant, where the boundary between the mundane and the divine often blurred. The night was a canvas for both the sacred and the profane. By the time of the Renaissance and Enlightenment, these practices began to evolve. Public entertainment rose in prominence as the secular world started to reclaim its stake in the nighttime hours. The Church's stronghold on how people spent their nights began to loosen, allowing more social and even political activities to take place after dark. Evening banquets became common in the courts of Europe. Nobles and royals would host lavish feasts that stretched long into the night, accompanied by music, theatre, and intellectual discourse. The concept of the night out began to take shape, though it was reserved for the upper echelons of society. But even then, the idea of the night as a time for freedom from daily constraints had begun to take root. As time passed, the quiet, sacred evenings of the medieval period gave way to a more bustling, dynamic night culture. The first theatres opened their doors in the evening, the flickering candlelight of these new performance spaces casting an alluring glow in the dark. By the 17th century, public performances had become part of the night's ritual. Plays, music, and eventually opera became common evening pastimes. The night, once feared for its potential dangers, was now becoming a venue for rebellion, change, and social commentary. It was during these dark hours that political and social movements began to find their voice. The very same time that had once been reserved for prayer and fear of the unknown was now a space where new ideas could take root and challenge the established order. The rise of evening entertainment during these periods mirrors the transformation of society itself. The night became a battleground not just for the forces of the supernatural, but for human creativity, expression, and liberation. What had once been a time for quiet contemplation and the unknown became a symbol of liberation, a chance to step away from the strict societal rules of the day. But this transformation did not happen overnight. It was a gradual process, one that shifted with cultural and technological advancements. Today, our modern nightlife is a direct reflection of these centuries-old traditions. It is no longer bound by candlelight or the constraints of religious doctrine. The club, the bar, the concert hall, all of these spaces are a modern evolution of the communal gatherings that began in the medieval period. Yet, despite the obvious differences in setting, they are fundamentally the same in one respect. They continue to serve as venues for socializing, expressing identity, and at times, defying societal norms. What we see in the medieval night secret gatherings, the blurring of sacred and profane, and the rise of a more secular evening culture continues to shape how we spend our nights today. The question remains, what did the night teach us then, and how do we carry those lessons with us now? Could it be that our modern love for the night, its music, its escape, and its freedom, has its roots deep in the medieval past, when darkness became the perfect setting for rebellion and renewal? This evolution of the night, from religious rituals to revelrous freedom, is the gateway to understanding how our modern relationship with darkness has changed. But it also leads us into the darker side of the night, the fears, superstitions, and myths that continue to haunt our cultural psyche, shaping not just what we do, but how we feel about the dark. Why do we still fear the night, centuries after medieval times? What is it about the darkness that continues to tug at our deepest anxieties, even in an age of electric lights and modern science? The fear of the unknown is as ancient as humanity itself, and in the medieval world, it was amplified by the very real dangers that lurked in the darkness. But even though the world has evolved, those fears, shaped by centuries of superstition, continue to cast a shadow over modern culture. Medieval people were deeply superstitious, and the night was full of possibilities that went far beyond the earthly realm. In the absence of light, the boundary between the living and the dead seemed fragile. Spirits, demons, and witches were believed to be at their most powerful when the world was asleep, when the veil between the worlds of the living and the dead was thinnest. This belief didn't just fade with the passage of time. It transformed and evolved, seeping into the cultural myths and legends that we still cling to today. In the centuries following the medieval period, tales of witches and demons continued to grow in power, particularly through literature and folklore. The fear of the night didn't just disappear, it adapted, finding its new form in the fantastical creatures and monsters that populated horror stories and popular entertainment. From the vampire in folklore to the werewolf in movies, the night remained a time when creatures from our darkest nightmares could step into the world. What was once a real fear of witches in dark corners of medieval villages became the thrilling, chilling tales we enjoy today. The night, once feared as a time for witches to gather, became the backdrop for stories that allow us to confront those ancient fears, but in a way that is safely contained in a book or film. This fear of the night has found its way into modern culture in ways that seem impossible to escape. The widespread popularity of Halloween, a night that is firmly rooted in medieval beliefs about the dead walking among the living, is a perfect example of how these ancient fears continue to permeate our daily lives. While Halloween may be a time for fun and costumes today, the traditions that shaped it are built on centuries of belief that the night was a time when the supernatural could come alive. Even modern horror films, often set in dark, isolated spaces, reflect the same anxieties that medieval people had about what lurked beyond the light. But the fear isn't just cultural, it's psychological. Studies have shown that many of us are still deeply affected by the night, even if we don't consciously realize it. The darkness taps into our primal fears, our deep-seated anxiety about the unknown, the way our bodies react to the absence of light. Our heightened senses, the quickening of our heartbeat reflects the ancient fear of the dark that we, as a species, have never fully shaken off. Even in a world that has been tamed by technology and bright lights, something within us still trembles at the thought of the night. So, how do these medieval fears continue to shape us today? How do they affect the way we view the night? And how do they influence our cultural practices and entertainment? The answer lies in how our imagination continues to be shaped by the very forces that once terrified our ancestors. The night, with all its mysteries, still holds power over us, a power that links us, in some strange way, to those who lived in a world far darker than our own. The fear of the dark, so deeply ingrained in medieval culture, still lingers, influencing not just the stories we tell, but the way we live. As we move from the terrifying monsters of folklore to the real, psychological effects of the night on the modern mind, we begin to see just how tightly the threads of fear are woven into our cultural fabric. But it's not just fear that the night holds. It also holds the possibility of transformation, of change. And that transformation brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, how the night itself has changed, from a time of terror to a time of endless possibility in modern urban life. Today, our cities never sleep, but did we lose something when we turned the night into daylight? As electric streetlights cast away the shadows, and the hum of modern life fills the air, our relationship with the night has undergone a dramatic transformation. No longer is the night a time for quiet reflection or mystical rituals. It has become a time of constant activity, of social events, businesses, and entertainment that never stop. What was once a realm of mystery and fear has been fully integrated into the rhythms of modern society. In the medieval era, the arrival of night marked the end of the day's labour. It was a time for rest, for quiet contemplation, and often for fear. Darkness brought closure, both literally and metaphorically. But the rise of electric lighting first, with gas lamps, and then with electric streetlights, redefined the night entirely. No longer did cities grow dark and quiet when the sun set. Instead, they became a glowing, bustling reflection of daytime activity. People began to socialize and work through the night, and the idea of the nightlife as we understand it today began to take shape. Nightclubs, bars, theatres, and 24-hour businesses have reshaped the modern cityscape. What once was a time for quiet, solitary reflection or communal gathering has become a non-stop, sensory-filled experience. Modern urban life has blurred the lines between day and night, with the once sacred hours of the dark now reserved for pleasure, entertainment, and consumption. The night has lost its mystery and become a space for the relentless pursuit of activity, as the 24-hour city fosters a culture that never truly shuts down. But in this constant hustle, has something been lost? As we chase away the darkness with bright lights, we also lose the sense of closure and mystery that once defined the night. The quiet, contemplative darkness that once allowed for reflection and connection with the unknown has been replaced by an endless cycle of entertainment and consumption. This transformation is not just technological, it's cultural. Our relationship with the night has shifted from one of reverence to one of constant activity. What happened when we chased away the darkness? Did we lose the sense of wonder and fear that once defined the night? As the night has evolved, so too has our relationship with it. And in the next chapter, we will explore the implications of this transformation. From a time of reflection to a time of non-stop activity, the night has become something entirely new. But has it lost the magic that once made it so powerful? Why does the night still fill us with unease? Could our deepest fears be rooted in a time long past, shaping our modern response to darkness? As the sun slips away and the world around us is consumed by shadow, a subtle but undeniable shift takes place within us. The night, which should be a time for rest, often becomes a realm of fear, anxiety, and anticipation. It is during these dark hours that our minds wander into territory we prefer to avoid: the unknown, the unseen, the unspoken. From a psychological perspective, this fear is not just a random reaction. It is deeply embedded in the evolution of human beings. Our ancestors, for whom survival was a constant battle, had a very different relationship with the night than we do today. For them, the darkness was not a comforting blanket that invited sleep, but a dangerous, unpredictable force. The creatures that roamed under the cover of night were more than just predators. They were symbols of all that was beyond human control. In the absence of light, the human mind was left to its own devices, to project its deepest fears onto the shadows. This ancient fear still lingers, hardwired into our DNA. Modern psychology has shown that the fear of darkness is a universal human trait, likely because it once served as an evolutionary advantage. In the past, the night was when danger was most likely to strike, be it from wild animals, enemies, or the unknown forces that lived in the dark corners of human imagination. As our ancestors evolved, so too did their ability to sense threats in the dark. Even today, we still feel a twinge of anxiety when we find ourselves in total darkness, as if some deep primal part of us is still on high alert. But what we once saw as a very real threat has now taken on a more abstract form. The darkness that once concealed predators and enemies now brings forth more psychological fears, isolation, uncertainty, and sometimes our own thoughts. The lack of light triggers a kind of unease that is difficult to explain, a vague sense that something could happen, something we can't control. Modern fears of the dark are often linked to anxiety about the unknown, a lack of visibility into our immediate surroundings that makes us feel vulnerable. Our ancestors feared the dark because it harbored physical dangers. We fear it because it often harbors our own inner anxieties, amplified by the silence and solitude that the night brings. This transformation of the night from a physical danger zone to an emotional and psychological space is a direct result of the evolution of the human mind. While we may no longer need to worry about wild animals lurking in the shadows, we still feel that same discomfort when the lights go out. It is the unknown that unsettles us, what we cannot see, what we cannot predict, that sends a ripple of fear through our minds. The absence of light gives way to our imagination, a place where anything is possible, and that is where fear thrives. Could the ancient anxieties of our medieval ancestors still be influencing how we experience the night today? The medieval mind feared demons, witches, and supernatural forces in the darkness, believing that the night was a realm where the veil between life and death was thinnest. Today, we may no longer fear spirits, but we still feel that same sense of unease when we are left alone in the dark, confronting only our thoughts. That psychological connection between darkness and fear has been passed down through the centuries, shaping our modern response to the night. As we look at the night through the lens of psychology, we see how fear and anxiety are still deeply connected to the darkness, no matter how much the world has changed. The modern mind, while not concerned with the supernatural, still recoils from the unknown and the unseen. And perhaps, in some way, this primal fear that connects us to the past is what makes the night so fascinating, so compelling. It is a space where fear and curiosity intertwine, and where the darkness continues to hold power over us. As we turn our attention from the ancient fears of the medieval mind to the present-day experience of the night, we begin to see how these age-old anxieties have been transformed, and how, in some ways, they continue to shape our world today. Could the fear we experience at night be more than just a psychological reaction? Could it be a remnant of something far older, something that connects us to a time when the night truly was a place of danger and uncertainty? The night was not just a time to fear, it was a sanctuary for the soul. While the darkness of night often inspired dread, it also provided a rare opportunity for introspection and personal reflection. For medieval monks, the night was a sacred time for prayer and contemplation, a time to step away from the distractions of the day and find peace in solitude. And while our modern minds may not approach the night with the same level of spiritual reverence, there remains a deep connection between darkness and reflection that has endured through the ages. In the medieval world, the hours after dark were a time for the soul to connect with the divine. Monks in their quiet monasteries would retreat into the silence of the night, using the stillness to deepen their relationship with God. These hours of solitude became an essential part of their spiritual practice. But the night also offered a space for personal reflection, for retreating from the chaos of daily life. The same ritual that helped them grow spiritually was, in many ways, a form of psychological healing. The silence of the night became a canvas for the mind to sort through thoughts and emotions without the intrusion of the outside world. Today, in our fast-paced world, the night still offers us the chance to reconnect with ourselves. The modern age, with its constant activity and endless distractions, has made it more difficult to find time for solitude. But the night still holds a special power. As the world around us quiets down, our own thoughts grow louder. For many, the late hours are when they find clarity, when they can step away from the noise of the day and turn inward. The quiet solitude of night is often when people find their greatest insights, when the world outside fades into the background and the mind can wander freely. Could it be that the very darkness we dread also holds the key to self-discovery? The absence of light allows us to see more clearly into our inner world, away from the distractions that cloud our judgment during the day. It's a time when we can reflect on our own lives, our relationships, our choices, and our fears. The night has a way of stripping away the superficial, leaving us alone with our true selves. For some, this may bring peace and tranquility, while for others, it may evoke discomfort as the shadows of their own thoughts emerge. What the medieval monks understood was that the night offered not just a reprieve from the physical world, but an opportunity to cultivate inner peace. In their solitude, they found clarity, and in their solitude, we, too, may find the space to confront our innermost selves. The fear of the night may still linger, but it also offers the chance for renewal. The same night that once inspired dread also became a source of strength, as the mind turned inward and found solace in the silence. As we move forward, we see that the night holds both isolation and connection, both fear and peace. The darkness is a paradox, offering the opportunity for both reflection and release. And as we examine how the night has shaped our lives over the centuries, we must ask ourselves, how has the night changed us? And how, in turn, have we changed the night? Could the medieval night have been the birthplace of global traditions we still celebrate today? What did we inherit from the past that still shapes our lives at night? The medieval era, with its deep connection to superstition, spirituality, and community, left an indelible mark on how we approach the night even now. The rituals, fears, and practices that defined this time didn't stay confined to Europe's borders. They spread across the world, influencing cultures far beyond their origins. As medieval Europe's belief in the supernatural grew, so too did its customs and practices surrounding the night. These traditions, woven deeply into the fabric of everyday life, spread outward through trade, exploration, and conquest. From the fear of witches and demons to the rituals meant to ward off evil, the medieval approach to the night had a profound impact on cultures worldwide. In regions like the Middle East and Asia, the idea of spirits and demons becoming active at night found resonance, though each culture adapted the concept to fit its own beliefs. The night, it seemed, was a universal space where the boundaries between life and death, good and evil, were most easily crossed. The rituals and superstitions of medieval Europe found their way into these distant lands, transforming over time into distinct practices that still echo in modern cultural traditions. Consider the way that Halloween, with its origins in the medieval Celtic festival of Samhain, has become a global celebration. What started as a night of honouring the dead and warding off evil spirits has evolved into a festival of fun, yet it still retains echoes of its darker, medieval roots. Similar traditions of ancestor worship and spirit offerings can be found across cultures, all connected by a shared belief in the power of the night. In some cultures, the night is still treated as a sacred space, a time to commune with ancestors or to make offerings to spirits. In others, it is a time to protect oneself from the supernatural, just as the medieval Europeans once did. What we see in these traditions is a clear connection to the past, a reflection of the medieval world's relationship with the dark. These global practices, though varied in their expressions, all share the same fundamental belief. The night is powerful, and it shapes us in ways we often don't fully understand. From the medieval nights filled with ritual and fear, we can trace a direct line to the traditions, superstitions, and fears that continue to shape our modern world. The global impact of these ancient practices is undeniable, and the night, once seen as a time of danger and mystery, now serves as a global stage for cultural expression. As we look at how the medieval night shaped our world, we realize that the legacy of those long, dark hours is still very much with us. As we move to the next chapter, we will reflect on how the night continues to influence our lives today, how it continues to shape our culture, our fears, and our understanding of the world. The legacy of the medieval night is not just something to look back on, it is something that continues to evolve, shaping how we live in the darkness. What have we sacrificed in our quest to banish the dark? Are we truly better off in a world that never sleeps? In a world awash with the glow of streetlights and the hum of technology, it's easy to forget that the night was once something far more complex, something far more sacred. For the people of the medieval era, the night was not merely a time for rest. It was a space for reflection, for mystery, and even for fear. It was a time when the very air felt charged with possibility. The boundary between the living and the dead, the natural and the supernatural, seemed thinner, as though the night itself held secrets just waiting to be discovered. As we step further into the modern age, however, those ancient rhythms have faded. The night, once revered and feared, has become a mere extension of the day. What was once a sacred and often dangerous realm, full of hidden truths and life-changing events, has been absorbed into the relentless pace of contemporary life. We now view the night as just another part of our 24-hour existence, one that is rarely allowed to fall into silence. Artificial lights flood our cities, our homes, our lives. The stars, once the only guideposts in the night sky, are now hidden behind a veil of neon and street lamps. The quiet rhythms of the natural world have been replaced by a ceaseless energy that never truly lets the world rest. Perhaps the most significant shift in our relationship with the night is the way it's now viewed as a commodity. The modern world has transformed the once necessary period of rest into another time for productivity, consumption, and entertainment. Nightclubs, late-night businesses, and 24-hour work cycles keep us awake when we should be replenishing ourselves. What was once a space of mystery and reflection has now become a time to keep moving, keep consuming, keep working. The transformation from a period of rest to a non-stop cycle is an emblematic shift of the modern world, where the silence of night has become synonymous with boredom and inactivity, and the natural rhythms of rest and sleep are treated as unnecessary interruptions to the flow of endless activity. But what have we lost in this shift? In our zeal to chase away the darkness, we've also distanced ourselves from the natural cycles that once governed human existence. The night, once the time for reflection, communion, and introspection, has become a neglected space, pushed aside in favor of artificial productivity. Without the boundaries of nightfall, we no longer honor the balance between work and rest, solitude and community. The disconnect between the rhythms of the natural world and our technological existence has led to a sense of disorientation, where the deep and necessary pauses of life have been erased in the pursuit of constant motion. In the medieval world, the night allowed for moments of quiet contemplation, often when the world was still and life slowed. The darkness held both fear and reverence, and in that space, people could reckon with their thoughts, their beliefs, and the mysteries of existence. The sacred rituals that took place in the night, whether in monasteries or small village homes, provided a balance to the chaos of the daytime world. It was a time for the soul to reconnect with itself, to reflect on life, death, and the divine. But today, even when we're surrounded by the lights of the modern world, we still find ourselves craving the quiet, the pause, the stillness that the night once offered. It's as if our modern lives have left us disconnected from something essential, something we cannot name. The night, once a powerful space of reflection and renewal, now seems like an afterthought, an inconvenient interruption in a world that refuses to stop. What have we sacrificed in our quest to banish the dark? Perhaps it's the richness of experience, the moments of introspection that come when we finally slow down. Perhaps it's the opportunity to reconnect with the natural world, to honor its rhythms, its cycles, and our place within them. As we transition from a world shaped by the mysteries of the night to a world illuminated by constant light, we may be overlooking something fundamental. The question remains, in our pursuit of progress, have we lost touch with the very essence of what makes us human? As we reflect on this transformation, we must consider how the night once offered a space for both fear and growth, how it was once a time of sacred connection, of deep introspection. And now, in a world that refuses to rest, we must ask ourselves, what are we losing in our relentless drive to turn the night into just another part of the day? This exploration of our relationship with the night sets the stage for the next reflection. What can we learn from the way our ancestors embraced the night? And how might we reclaim some of those lost practices in a world that increasingly has no room for darkness? Could the ancient night offer us a path forward in a world full of light and noise? What lessons from the past can we reclaim to heal our present? As we look back at the medieval night, a time filled with both reverence and fear, we find a depth of wisdom that modern life has largely overlooked. The way people of the past interacted with the night, balancing fear with reverence, solitude with community, may offer us a guide for how we can reconnect with the darkness and with ourselves. In medieval times, the night was not something to be feared and avoided, it was embraced as a necessary part of life. The silence of night was a time when people could step away from the daily grind, reflect on their lives, and commune with their beliefs. For many, the night was a time for prayer, but it was also a time to confront the unknown, to face the fears and uncertainties that often felt too overwhelming during the busyness of the day. The night held both danger and opportunity, and this duality became a key aspect of medieval life. People did not shy away from the night, they sought to understand it, to use it as a means of both personal reflection and spiritual renewal. What if today we could reclaim that space? In a world that never truly stops, that moves faster and faster with each passing hour, we have lost sight of the importance of quiet contemplation. The night was once a time to pause, to withdraw from the chaos, to reflect, and to listen to the deeper rhythms of life. In our modern 24-hour culture, this has been lost. We fill our nights with entertainment, work, and distractions, rarely allowing ourselves to sit in the silence and embrace the stillness of the dark. What if we could reclaim the night as a time for introspection, for personal growth, for connection to something greater than ourselves? There is a power in solitude, and the night has always been a place where solitude is sacred. Just as medieval monks withdrew from the world to find clarity in the silence, so too could we use the night to step away from the noise of our daily lives and reconnect with our own thoughts and feelings. The quiet hours allow us to hear what is often drowned out by the constant rush of modern life. It is in these moments of stillness that we might find the answers to questions we haven't dared to ask. Could it be that the very darkness we dread holds the key to self-discovery? The absence of light can be a powerful invitation to look inward, to reflect on the things that truly matter. It offers us the space to step away from external distractions and to focus on the internal world, the realm of our thoughts, our emotions, and our spirit. The night, with its deep silence and solitude, is not just a time to fear, it is a time to reconnect with ourselves and the universe around us. As we strive to move forward in our modern world, perhaps the greatest lesson the past offers us is the importance of embracing the night not as a threat, but as a gift. We must learn to balance the frantic pace of the day with the stillness of the night, finding the space to listen, to reflect, and to grow. The night is not our enemy, it is our teacher, our guide, and our sanctuary. It is in the darkness that we can find the clarity and peace that we so desperately seek in our busy, light-filled world. As we look ahead, let us not turn away from the lessons of the past. The night, once feared and revered, offers us a path back to balance, back to a deeper understanding of ourselves and our place in the world. It is not too late to reclaim the wisdom of our ancestors and use it to guide us through the noise and chaos of modern life. The night is not just a time for sleep. It is a time for transformation, for healing, and for connection. And perhaps, in embracing the night, we can begin to rediscover the missing pieces of ourselves. What do modern myths about the night reveal about our ancient fears? Are the creatures of our nightmares really just echoes of medieval ghosts? The night, long associated with the unknown, has been a source of fear for humanity for centuries. While modern technology and rationality have erased many of the dangers that once plagued our ancestors, the fears we face when the sun sets are deeply rooted in history. The stories we tell ourselves at night of creatures lurking in the dark, of spirits or figures who seem to haunt the silence are not so new after all. They are a direct line back to the medieval fears of demons, witches, and restless spirits that once filled the minds of those living in a world much darker, both literally and metaphorically, than our own. In the medieval world, the night was not just a time of rest. It was a realm where the boundaries between life and death were dangerously thin. This is where spirits roamed freely, witches practiced their forbidden arts, and demons sought to claim the souls of the living. People feared what they couldn't see or understand, and as nightfall approached, they whispered stories of the things that would emerge when darkness took hold. These stories didn't fade with the passing centuries. In fact, they have evolved, taking new forms, yet still retaining their primal power to frighten us. Take, for instance, the boogeyman, a figure that exists in various forms across cultures. In the medieval period, children were told to behave, or the night demon would come for them. This figure of dread, wrapped in mystery, was believed to be a supernatural force that only ventured out after dark. In modern society, the boogeyman has morphed, becoming the monster under the bed, or the figure in the closet, an almost universal myth that still sends shivers down the spine of a child left alone in the dark. The woman in white, another staple of modern folklore, shares an eerie resemblance to the medieval tales of spectral women who haunted the night. In medieval times, women accused of witchcraft or betrayal were often said to return as spirits, seeking revenge. Today, we have ghost stories of a woman dressed in white who appears on roadsides or in abandoned places, wandering and mourning. Her origin may have changed, but her presence continues to echo the medieval fears of spirits, death, and vengeance. Modern urban legends, such as stories of mysterious figures stalking people in the night or ghostly apparitions appearing in haunted places, carry the same haunting tone as medieval tales of spirits and demons. While we may no longer believe in the same entities, the fear remains. The figures we fear at night are no longer witches and demons with supernatural powers, but strangers who lurk in the dark corners of our cities, or the eerie apparitions of abandoned places. These stories are still deeply tied to the same anxieties that medieval people had when they spoke of the evil things that wandered the night. The connection between medieval fear and contemporary urban legends is not just about the monsters and spirits that occupy the dark, but about what those fears represent. In the medieval world, the darkness was a place of danger, but it was also a space of potential transformation. The unknown could hold not just terror, but also the promise of change, of confronting the otherworldly and emerging transformed. Today, while the fears have evolved, we still find ourselves fascinated by the unknown, still drawn to those edges of society where we don't fully understand what exists in the shadows. Our urban legends speak to our enduring fascination with the mysterious, the supernatural, and the unexplained, showing that the fear of the dark is not just a relic of the past, but a living, breathing part of our modern psyche. What these modern myths and medieval fears share is a common thread, a fear of the unknown, and the belief that when the lights go out, something far more mysterious and far more dangerous emerges. The stories have changed over time, but at their core, they reflect an ancient anxiety about what lurks when the world sleeps and how we confront the darkness. As we transition from the timeless fear of these night-based legends, we begin to see how these anxieties, long steeped in the supernatural, have bled into modern horror fiction, films, and books, continuing to shape our cultural perceptions of the night. Why do we still flock to movies and books about creatures that come out after dark? Could it be that we're still running from the very same fears our ancestors had? Fears that have lingered through the ages, never fully vanquished by our modern, rational minds? In the flicker of a film reel or the turn of a page, we find ourselves drawn back into the very darkness that once haunted our ancestors. Even today, the night still holds its grip on us only now. We watch it unfold in the stories we consume. Horror, as a genre, thrives on the same ancient fears that our medieval ancestors knew all too well. The difference now is that we've turned these fears into entertainment, giving them a name, a shape, and a place on the screen. Horror films and books are filled with creatures and spirits that emerge when the world is asleep, when the darkness is most complete. Take Time's Nosferatu *, one of the earliest horror films, where the vampire, an ancient being of the night, prowls in the shadows, a symbol of all that was feared in medieval times. The figure of the vampire is not new. It is a modern iteration of the demons, witches, and spirits that medieval people feared might come for them in the dead of night. Just as medieval people feared being prey to forces they could not control, modern horror draws on that same vulnerability to create tension and dread. The vampire, like the medieval demon, enters uninvited, feeds on the living, and vanishes into the night, leaving behind only darkness and fear. Books like Time's Dracula Times and films like Time's The Haunting of Hill House Times play on the same ancient fears of the supernatural. In these stories, the night is not just a setting, it is a character in itself. It is a place where the laws of the natural world break down, and the impossible becomes possible. These stories tap into the primal human fear that the night is not just a time for rest, but a time when the boundaries between the living and the dead, the natural and the supernatural, are most easily crossed. In these stories, the night is alive with possibility, just as it was in medieval times where anything or anyone might emerge from the shadows. The success of modern horror is, in many ways, a reflection of how little we have truly moved beyond these medieval fears. Despite our advances in technology, medicine, and science, we remain captivated by the unknown. The night, with all its potential for danger, still evokes the same primal emotions: fear, uncertainty, fascination. We may no longer believe in witches or demons in the same way our ancestors did, but the fear of what might be lurking just beyond our sight, just outside our door, remains as real as ever. But why are we so drawn to these dark stories? Perhaps it's because they allow us to confront our deepest fears without ever truly facing them. Through books and films, we enter the world of darkness and face the monsters that reside there, but we do so from the safety of our homes, under the protective glow of a screen. The night, which once held terrifying power over the human psyche, has become a form of entertainment, a way for us to explore the very same fears that once dominated our ancestors' lives. In our fascination with the supernatural, we are not just escaping our world, we are revisiting it. We are returning to a time when the night was not simply the absence of light, but a space where the unknown thrived. As we move from the realm of fiction to the streets of modern cities, we begin to see how the night, with all its lights and shadows, continues to affect us, reshaping the way we experience fear and comfort in an ever-evolving urban landscape. In a world that never truly goes dark, are we losing our connection to something primal and essential? What happens when the night is always lit? In the modern world, cities hum with energy long after the sun sets. The soft glow of streetlights, the flicker of neon signs, and the constant motion of late-night activity have transformed the night into just another extension of the day. But in this constant illumination, we may have lost something precious. The night, once a time for solitude, contemplation, and quiet reflection, has become a bustling commercial space, filled with noise and activity. Electric lighting, which has allowed us to extend the hours of our lives, has also stripped away the natural rhythm of day and night. In medieval times, when the sun set, the world slowed. People retreated into their homes, and the night became a time for rest, reflection, and connection with the divine. It was a time when the very absence of light encouraged introspection, when the quiet allowed the mind to wander. But now, with the advent of artificial lighting, the natural divide between day and night has been erased. Cities pulse with life at all hours. Nightclubs, restaurants, and offices remain open, and the hum of activity never fades. While this constant illumination offers safety and convenience, it also comes with a cost. The night, once a space for personal space and quiet, has become an arena for consumerism and constant activity. The need for artificial light has altered our relationship with the darkness, making it feel less mysterious, less meaningful. The absence of light that once evoked fear and wonder now feels ordinary. What was once a sacred time for reflection and intimacy has turned into a space of constant hustle, where there is always something to do, someone to meet, or something to buy. The paradox of modern urban life is that while we feel safer in the light, we also feel more disconnected. The sense of community that once flourished in the quiet, darkened streets is now lost in the constant bustle of city life. The night, once a time for personal reflection or communal gathering, is now a backdrop for consumerism and social noise. It is no longer a time for rest, but for relentless movement and activity. This transformation of the nightscape is not just a technological shift, it's a cultural one. We have traded the quiet darkness for the glow of neon lights and the hum of constant activity. And in doing so, we may have lost touch with something essential, our connection to the natural rhythms of the world and to the stillness that the night once offered. As we move further into a world that never truly goes dark, we must ask ourselves, in our quest for safety and convenience, have we sacrificed something vital? Could the night still hold the power to inspire awe, mystery, and reflection if we let it? Or have we allowed the lights to chase away the magic of the darkness forever? As we turn from the shifting cityscapes of the modern world, we begin to see how different cultures around the world still experience the night in their own unique ways. The global impact of medieval practices on the night reveals just how universal our relationship with darkness truly is. The night is not just an urban construct, it is a global experience, one that has been shaped by centuries of belief, fear, and tradition. Is the night the same everywhere, or does each culture experience darkness in its own unique way? What can we learn from the nighttime rituals of distant lands? When the sun dips below the horizon and the world is cloaked in darkness, the human experience of the night takes on myriad forms, shaped by culture, belief, and geography. In some corners of the world, the night is a time for vibrant celebration. In others, it's a sacred space for reflection and prayer. And while the medieval European experience of the night was often one of fear and the unknown, the rituals surrounding darkness in other parts of the world tell a different, yet equally rich, story. In Japan, the night has long been woven into the fabric of cultural and spiritual life. The country's vibrant night festivals, or matsuri, often take place after sunset, transforming the darkness into a stage for celebration. These festivals, which are deeply tied to Shinto traditions, honor gods, spirits, and ancestors. During these nocturnal celebrations, communities come together, lighting lanterns and dancing under the stars, creating a sense of unity and reverence. The night, in this context, is not feared. Rather, it is embraced as a time for connection both to the spiritual realm and to one another. The vibrant colors, the beating of drums, and the shared joy transform the darkness into something communal and sacred, a stark contrast to the fear-driven rituals of medieval Europe. Further west, in the Middle East, the night is also deeply embedded in the spiritual fabric of life. but in a more reflective and intimate way. The practice of nightly prayers, such as the Islamic Salat al-Tahajjud, is a time for devotion that takes place in the stillness of the night. For many, it is the most personal and profound connection to the divine. The quiet of the night creates a space where one can retreat from the world's distractions and enter a realm of spiritual peace. The darkness, in this context, is not a place of lurking terror, but a sacred silence that allows the individual to connect deeply with their faith and inner self. These nighttime prayers, often accompanied by candlelight or the soft glow of a lamp, echo ancient traditions that recognize the power of the night to bring people closer to the divine. Travel south to Africa, where the night assumes yet another role, one steeped in ancestral connection. In many African cultures, the night is a time when the spirits of ancestors are believed to return, offering guidance and protection. Rituals and ceremonies, often performed in the dark, call upon these spirits, and the community gathers around a fire to honor their forebears. The night is not just a space of solitude, it is a bridge between the living and the dead. The spirits of ancestors are invited to participate in the rituals, offering wisdom and strength. In this way, darkness is not something to be feared, but a vital part of the cosmic order that links generations past with the present. The night holds a deep spiritual resonance, one that has been passed down through centuries and remains alive in modern-day practices. What these traditions have in common, despite their differences, is a shared understanding of the night as something sacred, meaningful, and powerful. Whether through communal festivals, personal devotion, or ancestral connection, cultures across the world engage with the night in ways that reflect their deepest beliefs, fears, and desires. In contrast to the medieval European view of the night as a time for demons and danger, many societies see it as a time for reflection, connection, and spiritual growth. The global experience of night, then, is not a singular, universal truth. Instead, it is a collection of practices and perceptions that shape how we view the darkness, not as an enemy to be avoided, but as a realm to be explored and embraced. As we move from these global rituals and their spiritual significance, we begin to see how the night functions on a deeper, more personal level. Beyond rituals and community gatherings, the night offers an intimate space for introspection, self-discovery, and connection to the mysteries of the self. And in that personal realm, the night continues to play a profound role in shaping who we are, both individually and collectively. Could the night be the key to understanding who we truly are? What does it reveal about our deepest desires, fears, and identities? The night, in its silence and darkness, serves as a mirror to the self, reflecting not just who we are in the world, but who we are when the world quiets down. The relationship between humans and the night has always been more than just practical, it's profoundly psychological. From the medieval association of the night with death and the afterlife, to modern conceptions of the night as a space for self-expression and personal reflection, the darkness holds a mirror up to our souls, showing us both our hidden fears and our most intimate truths. In medieval times, the night was often a time of fear. It was associated with death, the afterlife, and the unknown. As night fell, people retreated into their homes, bolting doors against the invisible dangers that might lurk in the shadows. But for all the fear it inspired, the night also allowed people to confront these fears, to reckon with the reality of death and what might lie beyond. The medieval night, in all its darkness, became a time for the soul to come face to face with the unknown, a mirror that reflected the deepest anxieties of human existence. Today, the night still serves as a mirror, but its meaning has evolved. In our modern world, the night is often a time for self-expression, for creativity, and for reflection. While the medieval mind may have feared what the dark held, the modern individual often seeks solace in it. The quiet of the night has become a canvas for introspection, a space where we can escape the constant noise of the day and reflect on who we are. It is no coincidence that many great works of art, literature, and music are created in the stillness of the night. In the absence of light, our thoughts become clearer, and our identities more defined. For some, the night is a time for self-exploration. People may stay up late, lost in thought, contemplating their relationships, their life choices, or their place in the world. The night has a way of stripping away the distractions of the day, allowing us to confront the parts of ourselves we might avoid when the world is awake. In this sense, the night becomes a time for personal transformation. a space where we can let go of the identities imposed on us and reconnect with our truest selves. In a world that is constantly buzzing with activity, the night offers us a rare opportunity to pause. The overwhelming flood of information, images, and interactions that we experience during the day can leave us feeling fragmented and disconnected from ourselves. But in the silence of the night, we have the chance to piece ourselves back together. It's a time when we can reflect on the life we're living, the choices we've made, and the paths still ahead of us. It is in the stillness of the night that we often come face to face with our deepest desires, our darkest fears, and our most profound truths. But the night also holds a place for creativity and self-expression. Just as medieval monks used the solitude of the night for prayer and contemplation, so too do modern individuals use it to create. The night, in its quiet mystery, offers a sanctuary where we can explore who we are, free from the judgment and noise of the world. Whether it's through writing, painting, music, or simply the act of thinking, the night allows us to express parts of ourselves that might otherwise remain hidden. In the modern world, the night serves not only as a time for self-expression but as a reminder of the power of solitude. In a society that increasingly values constant connectivity and external validation, the night allows us to reconnect with the internal, to find meaning and purpose in the quiet moments of introspection. The night holds a mirror up to our identities, reflecting not just who we are in the light of day, but who we are when the world is still. As we look at the night through the lens of personal identity, we begin to understand its profound role in shaping both who we are and how we view the world around us. The night is not just a physical time of day. It is a symbolic space that allows us to reflect on the mysteries of existence, to confront our own darkness, and to embrace the deepest parts of ourselves. The night remains a mirror, one that reflects both the fears and the potential for transformation within us all. Is the night ever truly knowable? Despite all our advances, why does it still hold such power over us? The night, dark, silent, mysterious, has always been a source of both fascination and fear. From the ancient days when it was a realm inhabited by spirits, demons, and gods, to the modern age where technology has sought to pierce its shadows with artificial light, the night continues to be an enigma we cannot fully unravel. Even now, in our age of endless connectivity and bright city streets, we still find ourselves drawn to the quiet mysteries that darkness promises. Throughout history, we have tried to tame the night. We've built cities that never sleep, invented lights that chase away the darkness, and created rituals to bring comfort to the fears it evokes. And yet, despite these efforts, the night remains elusive. Its power over us is undeniable. It holds a magnetic pull, a lure toward self-reflection, creativity, and contemplation, even as it still whispers to us of danger, death, and the unknown. The night has always been a liminal space, a place between the worlds of the living and the dead, where anything could happen and everything feels possible. Medieval people feared the night because they knew that when the sun disappeared, so too did the certainty of their world. The darkness was a place of unknown threats, a time when demons could creep into the shadows and supernatural forces could reign. Yet, it was also a time for reflection, for rituals, for spiritual connection. Even as the night seemed to represent danger, it offered a paradoxical opportunity for growth, introspection, and even escape from the mundane. Over time, these ideas evolved, but the night remained a space where humanity could explore its deepest desires and darkest fears. In the modern world, technology has altered our relationship with the night. We've replaced the quiet of the night with the hum of constant activity. Streetlights flood our cities, and neon signs keep the darkness at bay. Yet, in spite of this artificial light, the night continues to hold a certain power over us. It's still the time when we are most likely to confront ourselves, whether through the loneliness we may feel or the creativity that bursts forth in the silence. The night still offers a mirror, reflecting both the fears that continue to haunt us and the unspoken truths we may avoid during the brightness of day. Even with all our knowledge, the night remains beyond our full understanding. We've learned so much about the world, about the stars, the moon, the cycle of time, and yet, the night still calls to us with the same intensity it did centuries ago. What is it about the dark that continues to capture our imagination? Why does it still elicit a sense of awe, and sometimes fear, even in an age where we no longer rely on the night to survive, but rather to experience something deeper? The mysteries of the night are not only physical, they are psychological, emotional, and spiritual. In the silence and darkness, we are confronted with parts of ourselves we can rarely access in the daylight hours. The night remains, for all our technological advances, an untapped source of inspiration and reflection. It is a canvas upon which we can project our dreams and our fears. It continues to shape our myths, our art, and our stories. It is both timeless and ever-changing, an enduring enigma that refuses to be tamed, no matter how many streetlights we install or how brightly the moon may shine. As we reflect on the night, how it has shaped our history, and how it continues to shape us, we are reminded that the darkness, while often feared, is also a gateway to creativity, to introspection, and perhaps to understanding what lies hidden beneath the surface of our consciousness. The night is far from an enemy to be avoided, it is a realm to be embraced. A timeless enigma that we, as a species, have always sought to understand, but which remains as elusive as ever. What if the night isn't something to fear, but something to embrace? Could it be that the darkness holds more than just mystery, it holds answers? As we draw this exploration of the night to a close, it is impossible not to reflect on the profound and enduring impact that the darkness has had on humanity. For centuries, we have danced with the night, fearing it, worshipping it, and eventually transforming it. But perhaps, in our modern, illuminated world, we've overlooked something essential, something that the night, in all its mystery, can offer us. From the medieval world, where the night was a time of superstition and spiritual rituals, to the present day, where the night has been claimed by entertainment, commerce, and convenience, our relationship with the dark has evolved. But in this evolution, what have we lost? The night was once a time for reflection, for connection to something greater than ourselves, whether that meant connecting with the divine, the ancestors, or our own inner thoughts. Now, in our rush to keep the lights on, we've transformed the night into just another extension of the day, a time to consume, to work, or to socialize. But what if we've been looking at the night all wrong? What if, instead of seeing the dark as something to avoid or fear, we could begin to embrace it? The night has always been a space where we can find answers, where we can confront our deepest fears and desires. It is in the solitude of the dark that we often find clarity free from the distractions of the day, the noise of the world, and the constant pull of obligation. The night holds the potential for personal growth and self-discovery. What if the night, rather than being a threat, is actually a gift? A space where we can shed the personas we wear in the daylight hours and confront our true selves. For centuries, artists, writers, and musicians have flocked to the darkness to create their most profound works. In the stillness of the night, the most unexpected ideas emerge, the deepest truths surface, and the creativity that has lain dormant throughout the day is unleashed. Perhaps the night holds the power to help us access parts of ourselves we don't even know exist. The darkness also holds the possibility for spiritual renewal. Whether through meditation, prayer, or simple reflection, the night offers a sacred space where we can reconnect with something beyond our immediate selves. It has been a time for centuries of people to come together in rituals that honor life, death, and the mysteries of the world. Today, in our modern world of constant light, it is easy to forget that the night once held such profound significance. As we look at the night through a new lens, we begin to see it not just as a time to rest, but as an opportunity to delve deeper into ourselves and the world around us. It is a space that allows us to reflect, to create, to heal. It is a time when we can tap into our truest, most authentic selves. Instead of fearing the night, perhaps we should embrace it, not as an enemy, but as a guide to personal growth, self-discovery, and connection with the mysteries of life. The night, in all its timeless enigma, continues to shape us in ways we cannot fully comprehend. It is both a mirror, reflecting our fears and desires, and a blank canvas, waiting for us to create something new. As we move forward in our journey through life, perhaps the greatest lesson we can learn from the night is that we do not have to fear it. Instead, we should look to it for inspiration, for reflection, and for understanding. The darkness is not just a backdrop for our lives, it is a space that holds the key to who we are and who we can become. As we end this exploration of the night, we are left with one lingering question. Will we continue to fear the dark, or will we learn to embrace its mysteries, its silence, and its potential for growth? The night may be shrouded in mystery, but it is also a space where the most profound answers are found.